Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host, who is constantly pushing the boundaries of sports marketing, from viral social media campaigns to immersive brand activations, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. I'm Sean Callanan, and welcome to episode 370 of Sports Geek. In this week's episode, I chat with Mark Jensen, the GM of Ops at the Western Sydney Wanderers FC, playing in the A-Leagues. Thank you very much for listening. You might be doing so at our website, sportsgeekhq.com, where you can find every single episode and also links to all the guests like Mark. But you also could be listening to on your favourite podcast platform, whether that be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or my favourite Pocket Casts. If you can leave a review, much appreciated. But what I do appreciate more is when you pass it on either via word of mouth or send a sneaky DM or add a episode into your favourite WhatsApp chat. Pass it on to people who are working the same role as yourself. Really do appreciate it. It helps grow the audience, and I really do appreciate it. As always, you can contact me across social media at Sean Callanan or at Sports Geek across most platforms. Or you can send me an email, sean@sportsgeekhq.com, whether that's sending me an email thanking me for a recent episode and talking to someone that they know, like Brian did, or reaching out and saying, hey, this is really helping with my role, like Joseph did. I really do appreciate those emails. Thank you to you both for sending me an email. So if you feel free, send me an email, sean@sportsgeekhq.com. I do love working with podcast listeners, so we can figure that out either via emailing or you can book in for a Pick My Brain session. But let's get into this discussion with Mark Jensen from Western Sydney Wanderers. Very happy to welcome Mark Jensen. He's the General Manager of Operations at the Western Sydney Wanderers FC, playing in the A-Leagues, men and women. Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks for having me, finally.
Yeah, you say finally. You've been a bit like my white whale. For those who don't know, Mark replied to an email from 2023 where I said 2023 is the year, and you replied this year saying this is the year. So it has been something we've been planning for a while. I wanted to ask firstly, as I normally do at the start off, how did you get your start in sports?
So I was working for government at the time, New South Wales government. I moved down from Brisbane about a year earlier for a short-run crack at journalism, which was sort of not my main intention, but, a bit of fun. And my wife now, partner at the time, showed me a clipping about the World Cup bid that were looking for people. So I went and had a meeting with Benita Merciades, who was GM of Corporate Affairs and Communications at the time at Football Australia, and I moved over there into a role in the A-Leagues Women's League and the Matildas as the media manager, media officer for the sort of first 4 years of my journey. And then with the start of the Wanderers in 2012, helped announce that, helped do the brand work on that with a really, really strong internal team. And as that built out, at the end of year one, I joined the Wanderers full-time. And I've been with them ever since. So,
that's coming in from that media background and then working at Football Australia and seeing it from both the elite side and the league side. Did it give you a pretty good, view of the landscape, the football landscape in Australia? And then obviously, seeing the Wanderers debut, was it an exciting place? And you're like, want to be part of that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's football throughout my lifetime of following the game and, watching the game has gone through many life cycles. So NSL into the A-League, into, peaks and troughs of the A-League, peaks and troughs of national teams. So the Socceroos in, 2005 to 2010 were the team. Matildas have now taken that mantle from, 2000 and sort of 18 to now have really grown into, a monumental team. And, I was media manager at the Asian Cup in 2010. Got to be part of that amazing result when they lifted the Asian Cup in China with Tom Samani at the helm, and a 16-year-old Sam Kerr and a 16-year-old Caitlin Ford, and a real new version of the game coming through that was exciting and brash and something that we've seen transform into, household names in this country. So I've seen a lot in football, and the good, the bad, and the ugly. The birth of the Wanderers was the good. It came straight off the back of Gold Coast United folding, having their licence revoked, and a new team really had to come in fast. And obviously the work done on the Sydney Rangers previously by a group couldn't quite get the funding for it, but in the end it showed that there was a huge market in Western Sydney, a really open market in Western Sydney for a football club, a market that hadn't really adopted the Sydney FC mentality. It was, too far east for the West. And the first year of that club was just monumental. It was a huge effort from the staff at the FFA and also the staff of this new club, and, led by Lyle Gorman and John Satsimus at the time, and Tony Popovich, of course. And that just dragged the league back to a really monumental point. And that was coupled with the Del Piero inclusion and this trident of players that came in, which was Shinji Ono, Del Piero and Emil Heskey, just giving that league and the media something to talk about regularly and something the mainstream population could really understand. What we saw with the Wanderers in that first 2 years was just phenomenal in terms of fan support, in terms of membership revenue, in terms of ability to sustainably commercialise a sport and a team. And I think after the Gold Coast and North Queensland Fury issues and those teams folding, it was really, really warming for football to be able to see a success story come through and really take leaps and strides in the league.
And that early piece, because, building an expansion team or a team from scratch and building out an identity and getting people to rally around that identity, for those who don't know, Western Sydney has been a sporting front that a lot of leagues have tried to break. What were some of the things that made it work for the Wanderers?
I think the way the whole club was brought to life was really, really fundamental. The fan forums that were created around Western Sydney, there were 7 of them across all points of Western Sydney, and it's this huge expanse. I don't think people quite understand how quite big Western Sydney really is. To be able to reach out to those people and talk to them about football, about what they wanted to see, about how that team should come to life was really fundamental. The background of those discussions was a lot of support from the ethnic-based clubs, the Marconis, the Sydney Uniteds, Bonnie Riggs, Sydney Olympics, all coming together and talking about football and what they wanted to see. And then the manifestation of that became really available to all people to attend and be together and come together in the stands. And I think there was a first ever game at Cook Park that the Wanderers played a Nepean FC team. There was 4,500 people attending this match. It's a grassroots field. The stand holds about 600 people. And it was just packed around the whole fringes of the area. And that's when you knew that something big was about to happen. The first season took a while to get going. The first game didn't break any records in terms of crowd attendance at Parramatta Stadium, but slowly, people started to understand that it meant more than just a team being in the area. It meant something that you could all get behind. And I think there's a real palpable experience that people felt being part of that and finally having something in Western Sydney that they could call their own, something that connected them all and something that could bring anyone through the gates and into a venue with a shared common language, which was football. Western Sydney has a hugely diverse population, and that population can talk about football apart from any other thing. So, you remove politics, you remove religion, you remove race, and it's just football. And that's really what I think connected it in the first place. And then that 10-match winning streak in there with under Popovich in that first year was just, galvanised that support so much and really created a juggernaut that people got on really quickly. And if you look at the difference between year 1 and year 2's memberships, they shot up from, I think there was 8,000 members or 9,000 members in year 1 to 16,000 in year 2. And that's season ticket members, which is fundamental in terms of creating a culture and a stability for your foundations of the club to be able to grow from.
So you coming at it both from a media point of view and a marketing point of view, and that's your role. And I've spoken to other marketers that try to capture that lightning in a bottle when something like that happens on field or on pitch, and then try to massage it into the marketing message, and how do you grow that? I think the Warriors did that really well in 2015 with strength in numbers, sort of taking it from the locker room and into the stands. I like what you guys did, similar to that. Were you looking at it, as a passionate football person, but looking at it from a marketing point of view, going, how do we get that level up? How do we bring more people into this tribe?
Yeah, absolutely. It was the marketing approach for the Wanderers has always been about the community, and I think most of our campaigns have always spoken to that. It's been facing towards the community and embracing the community that we live in across all cultures, diversities, and demographics across regional Western Sydney and New South Wales. Even we get all the way out to Bathurst and Forbes and Mudgee and Orange, down to Goulburn, and up north further to whoever wants to be part of that Western Sydney mentality. And it really is an ideology. The RBB talks about it really clearly in their songs about Western Sydney is a state of mind. It's where you're from, it's what you're connected to, and it is a point of difference. So we've always tried to be true to that brand stability or foundation, which is we are from the community, we are from the West. We're never going to shy away from that. We're always going to try and bring those people together and be something for the community. So, vision statement has always been for the people of Western Sydney, by the people of Western Sydney. It's a really strong one. It's Lyle Gorman talked about it all the time in his first 2 years at the club. It's standing on the shoulders of pioneers that came before us to make football in this country, the heartbeat of football in this country, work. And that's the whole stat around 50% of all Socceroos came from Western Sydney. Had their careers start in Western Sydney at all those famous NSL clubs that are still operating today, and we'll see what happens with that with the NSD coming in, and also what happens in the future of the game with the potential of Pro-Rel or expansion of the A-League to more teams, more regions as well.
But also, like, you do hear other people, they're talking about implementing diversity programs and those kind of things. But like you said, the way that Western Sydney is structured, it's multicultural and diverse. From street to street, from suburb to suburb. Like you don't have to roll out a program because everyone who's walking in is coming from all walks of life.
It's true, and that's why we've always kept football as our core. We don't try and go out there and deliver too many other things. We always try and deliver things that has football at its core. So that's a lot of coaching sessions, a lot of, the brand awareness can be so strong when you just take the club colours, players from our men's and women's team, coaches out to schools, to grassroots clubs, and give them an experience. That doesn't have to be your top billing player. It's the colours and the badge that makes it really, really shine through. And we've just been really focused on doing that consistently, COVID aside, really, for the last 11 years, really, really focused on connecting with those audiences, being as visible and available to those audiences as possible, and then trying to bring them to the venue to have that Wonderland experience. And I think, the year one guys, I'll never take credit for this because it wasn't mine, but Wonderland was an idea that came out from the year one team that was really palpable. It really created an energy that Parramatta Stadium was the place to be, was the noise and chaos and energy and excitement around football, and it was everyone included. And I think that was the really critical factor. The diversity was real. It was obvious. You had everyone sitting together with everyone else that stand the RBB. You see those old images from the RBB, and that was full of 2,000, 2,200 people every match day. We sold out every match until we closed Parramatta Stadium for the redevelopment, except for one against Wellington Phoenix from season 2 to season 6. So, that just shows the value that was put on the club and the value of the experience of the Wonderland experience, and just, how a group of people came together and really, really worked for this inside and outside of the club. And that's, we've got volunteers that have been foundation volunteers since the start, and they've stayed with the club. And volunteerism runs sport in this country. It's a multi-billion-dollar saving for sports in this country. Without them you can't do what you want to do in terms of match day experience and match day presentation, and focus on the areas you want, which is basically making a good experience for the people that come into your venue. So all that coming together really is about embracing that community and holding on to them and thanking them for what they do with you. And I think that's something the club has to always keep to its core value, which is that for the people, by the people culture.
And was that something that you talked a little bit about the moving homes, that you went through in those early years? You're now at CompBank. You're really entrusted with Wonderland, and how do we make it work in a new venue as you're in transition? Was that one down to your volunteers, but also something you want to go, when we do get to our final destination, we want to make this, level up yet again, but still feel like Wonderland in its first instance?
Yeah, the plan was always to try and make Parramatta Stadium, CompBank Stadium now, Pertec Stadium then, into that Wonderland experience. The return to the stadium was fantastic. We had 14,500 average crowds coming back to the stadium in 2019, 2020 until COVID hit and really, really set the cat amongst the pigeons for sport in general and the whole events and entertainment industry. The 3 years leaving Parramatta, where we went to mixed-use stadiums of ANZ Stadium, Stadium Australia in Sydney Olympic Park, and its neighbouring Spotless Stadium, which is now Giant Stadium, was difficult because they were both major event stadiums or round stadiums. Now, when you've got an 83,000-seat stadium, 20,000 ticketed fans don't quite fit into that with the same ferocity and scarcity and experience approach that you had at Parramatta. The Spotless Stadium experience was very much different again because it was an AFL cricket field. You're so far away from the action, it's hard to create that intensity and that experience that was Wonderland. So when we moved back into CompBank, it was about trying to bring that back to life. And in the first days, it really worked. It was great. People started feeling it again, but there was some difference in terms of what the old stadium was. It was 10,000 seats bigger. They built it in a way that was brilliant, but functional for the cost. I think there was a $360 million spend on CompBank Stadium as opposed to a $900 million spend on the new Allianz Stadium for an extra 10,000 seats. So there's a slight difference there, but that meant corporate hospitality and all the corporate tickets were on one side, and then the seating bowl was essentially 3 other stands. And in the east, in Western Sydney, when you're staring into the sun on a hot afternoon, it can be not the most pleasant experience. So people going from a tunnel seat at the old Parramatta Stadium, which was falling down around us, and there was no corporate hospitality areas of value there of note really. The Cumberland Lounge, as it was, didn't even have a bathroom in it. So that's the sort of level you're at. The bathroom is just out in the general public section. So very hard to make that corporate experience work. And you see that in US sports, how much the corporate experience is complementing the fan experience to make sure that everyone has a great experience and you can have diversity in that cost per ticket as well, which is hugely important. So the CompBank return was tricky, and then there was a little bit of discomfort in terms of not getting the same for same that they had at the old stadium. But, we worked through a lot of that. We're still working through that today, that some of those fans dropped off and it's hard to get them back because they don't feel like they were given the same opportunity or given the same. And as a fan, you always know that if there's a disappointment in your life that isn't the team performance, it can create a longer lasting scar. Whereas if it's team performance, that's part of being a fan. You roll with the highs and lows. As a mad Arsenal fan, I'm finally back into the highs ish, but the 2010s was a tricky time. So stayed in the league though, so that was good. Never doubt. But it's the same. You can enjoy the highs and lows of a team performance, but if it's off the field stuff that's changing, that you're not happy with, that really changes your customer experience. And we don't like to call them customers, but in a marketing sense, it's a customer experience that you're dealing with. that we really like to think of our fans and members as exactly that. So members are someone with a season ticket, someone that's, wants to be part of your club and connected to it. And then there's a huge breadth of fans that sort of underpin the media and the marketing and the communication we do, just to be able to talk to them about what's happening. And really that's become the biggest challenge as a communicator and a marketer in the A-Leagues is visibility in this highly diverse media landscape that we're now in. And it's just fragmented so much since I started, even in media, in terms of the streamers, in terms of social media, in terms of the ability to get cut through and clarity when there's, not just 1,000 messages coming at you every day. There's, 10,000. It's 10x approach in terms of what we're being lambasted with at the moment as a consumer. And so you've got to be able to cut through that. And for us, that's about creating familiarity, that's about creating community, and that's about creating connection. And I think they're the things that we've really always tried to focus on. And as well as, trying to get into the zeitgeist a little bit of what Western Sydney is and the youth audience there, and how we can make them feel that we're a place to be a part of, a group to be a part of, and something that they can access. And how do you create invitations to them to get that access? And a lot of it, especially in multicultural communities, is about an invitation. We've found over time, you have to invite them in. They don't feel welcome straight away. You have to invite them in. So when we're talking about new audiences coming into Western Sydney all the time and the growth rate of Western Sydney, you've got to consider the activity of actually inviting new families and new audiences and new people in. How you can do that effectively is really key.
I mean, it's a really interesting point because, one, you are having this, migration of fans through multiple experiences and multiple stadiums and having to manage that. And then, like you said, this fragmentation of entertainment and the way that they're communicated with, and it becomes more and more important for the club to have their own channels and to have that one-on-one sort of conversation with the fans. And you are having conversation with the fans when they're going from one stadium to another stadium and their seat moves or their season package moves and that there's changes. What was that from a data problem, and trying to understand your CRM and get the right people in over that journey?
Yeah, it was tricky. So moving from a 20,000 seat stadium to an 83,000 seat stadium, or I think Spotless was 28,000 seat stadium, that was pretty easy because everyone got to sit where they wanted to sit. It was the 60-odd thousand seats around them that was tricky to fill. So we managed to do a great job of that. Round one, first day at ANZ Stadium, we got, a league record, still stands today, of 61,880 people into the venue. Unfortunately, we lost that day quite badly to our biggest rival. So that kind of leaves a bit of a bad taste in some people's mouths, especially if they're experiencing it for the first time. But the atmosphere and the electricity and excitement of that game was pretty intense and pretty incredible, and something you hope people come back to. So it's about, building that huge audience pool, and then being able to slowly work with them over time. We probably lent too far into a sales approach for a while there because of that size of venue and because we were constantly trying to find people to come into the venue. We've really moved in the last couple of years into a more of an engagement-led approach and really trying to just talk to people about what we are and who we are and why we do what we do and who our players are and why it feels important to be part of that, especially with this huge grassroots community that football has. Connecting to them in a meaningful way is really tricky because we've got ridiculous numbers of people playing the game. In Western Sydney, there's 110 to 115,000. I haven't got this year's registration figures yet, but participants playing the game in Western Sydney alone. So that's a huge audience. But when you step back from that audience, you start looking at what are the family behaviours and what are the parent behaviours. And a lot of the time it's dad will be gaming app in one hand, beer in the other hand, watching rugby league on the TV, talking about, his super coach. So the kid's playing the game, wants to play the game, loves Messi, loves Mbappe, loves Ronaldo, and then watches what their family's watching, and that's rugby league. So that cut through to the elite of our game in this country and that attendance is tricky. So you've always got to be able to try and find ways to bring them in. And that's not always through just, come to the game, buy a ticket, come to the game. It's got to be about this is why this is exciting. We're part of this culture. We're part of that culture. We're part of Western Sydney's music scene. We're part of Western Sydney's fashion scene. We're part of Western Sydney's, cultural fabric. And that's where the brand campaigns often come in. So, Western Sydney, the fabric of Western Sydney is us, is all about that. If you're one of us, kind of action. The call and response of, who do we sing for? We sing for Wanderers is still used effectively and consistently across what we do to be able to try and make people feel like, yep, there's something here, there's local. I may not see it on Channel 9 or Channel 7 News unless it's a Sydney derby. But I'm starting to know that it's there, and I'm starting to want to be connected to it, and I'm starting to be able to go, Brandon Barello's a player I want to emulate. Lawrence Thomas is a player I want to emulate when they sort of rise to that Socceroos level. Or, Milos Ninkovic has come to the club. What a player. I just can't wait to see him play. We want to see more of that come through. And you've got to build that over time, because in the A-League, it's high squad turnovers a lot of the time, and a lot of players using the A-League as it should be, as a launch pad to bigger leagues overseas. And when I say bigger leagues overseas, I'm talking about where football is the number one sport in the country, not the number 4 or 5 sport in the country as it is here. And so that's where that palpable sense of what football is comes to life, where you see the best players in the world playing, and whereas in Australia, it's where the best young players get their chance to play. And I think that's something that we've got to really build on and grow as a league and as a strategy moving forward.
And you mentioned there about the brand pieces, and that's really one of the, you guys put a lot of effort and do award-winning brand pieces year on year, and you're sort of stacking year on year to sort of build that equity with the fans to go, I am going to fall in love with the crest, I am going to fall in love with the jersey, I'm going to fall in love with the club. Like you said, there is the turnover, but that's the way that you get some cut through and reach that young boy or young girl that's playing on a weekend, and their dad's watching something else. But it's that year on year, you feel like that keeps building, and that equity with those kids. And I'm sure you're seeing them through, whether in active support as they hit 18, 19, and they've got their own disposable cash and they can come to the games. Is that something you've actually started seeing that generation come through to games?
Yeah, we have. It's a lot of that family generation that started with the club back in Parramatta days. Their kids are now in the RBB. They're no longer the little toddler. They're coming in as a teenager now. And I think that's we're only one generation in, really. We're 12 years old as a club this year. And realistically, we've only really existed for 11 years. So the fan generational change and generational growth is, AFL and rugby league have got such ground on us because of that longer term ability to have consistency across their teams. Now, football's been around in Australia for longer than both those sports. The difference is it's been fragmented a lot of the time. So there hasn't been one team to follow. There hasn't been one, elite competition that they could continue with. The fact that I think Newcastle Jets and Perth Glory are the only 2 teams from the NSL days that were part of the new A-League sort of loses a lot of that generational knowledge and generational consistency that you might have. So we're still building that up, but we see really good growth and green shoots in the football fan audience that have come through, and their dads play and their kids play, and they want to do this together. The first years was all about reconnecting families. I think that was a huge bit of anecdotal information we got back out of our research and surveys, was families who didn't have anything in common to do, maybe a Sunday dinner if they still had that, or church if they still went to that together, were able to reconnect. So multi-generationals coming together at a football match, and we were having fan groups of 30, 40, 50 people at its best, of fan groups that would come together because that was their opportunity to see each other. And getting to do that 13, 14, 15 times a year is really, really meaningful in terms of that connectivity that we seek and we try to talk about. Western Sydney's got some issues in terms of, infrastructure challenges in different areas where, WestConnect's obviously helped a lot with the new roadways, but there is still a large population of Western Sydney families travelling to the city for work, travelling home, and that time difference and that time away from their family is a is an issue for a lot of families, that they lose that connectivity. So trying to create moments where that can come together in a meaningful way around something that's fun, around something that's inclusive, is hugely important. All that data obviously is important for us as well to come into our CRM and start understanding what it looks like and how that revolves around a user journey or a consumer journey that we might look at. But that's also, as you know, CRM, getting the best out of your CRMs, sometimes tricky and very expensive proposition. We've been through some significant challenges in the past with trying to implement a leading CRM approach. And I think with what the APL has done in the last 2 years, and they've copped some criticism recently for some other activities, but the MarTech stack they actually built was pretty phenomenal and pretty leading in terms of what we needed as clubs. It's just making sure now that we can execute that is the real trick, and making sure we can get the most value out of that, which is personalised connectivity to fans, better understanding of what fans' wants and needs are, and better understanding of user journeys and consumer needs and consumer requirements around fandom and supporting a team. So what we've done is, we had a great team for the startup years, and we had a really consistent team for about 8 years at this club. And as time changes, so do people's roles and ability to continue in the same place. So we lost some really important people in here, and we had to rebuild that. And it was, can we bring new talent in for the price that we've got? No. So let's look further afield and see what agencies can we work with that we trust, that can really bring us that value, and go on a bit of a cultural drive with them to make sure that they know exactly what we want, we know exactly what they can deliver, and get expertise to help you with this journey. And I think that's the biggest thing we found, that getting trusted expertise to support you in your marketing brand outcomes is really important, and making sure they can do that for value is hugely important, especially with a sport that we don't have huge marketing budgets. It's we can do some pretty clever things on a shoestring. So that's why partners and working with people that you trust is really important.
Then working on that wider piece, you've now got a stadium that doesn't have 83,000 tickets, and so you've only got this finite amount of tickets, but you've got this influx of more people coming into the game. I'm assuming there was a more interest, post Matildas, and that post Matildas glow with all the people who went to the Matildas games, one, interested in playing, and then there's the issue of, can we get enough pitches to let these kids play? But then also, you're a marketer. You go, I want them to be Wanderers fans. That might mean coming to one game a year, not necessarily every game. How do you start, the Jenga puzzle that is filling your stadium all the time with the most amount of people, keeping everyone happy and maximising as much revenue as you can? How have you sort of tackled that problem?
Yeah, so there's a few things we've looked at to tackle that, and the post-COVID return to football wasn't as avid as some other sports, where to build up an audience, you need to be really visible and present consistently, and you need to catch them when they're not necessarily expecting you to be talking to them, which is how media really, really supports sports. Now, AFL and NRL have been able to do that spectacularly because of their huge media networks and their huge media rights, and they're the best sports of what they do in this country. You go anywhere else in the world, the Wigan game aside for Penrith, the NRL and the AFL is the leading sport, same as NBA and NFL in the US is, there's nowhere better in the world that it's played. There's nowhere else in the world that's really played for the NFL. So it's about being able to capitalise on, the awareness that you can create, and then building more awareness on top of that through genuine community engagement activities. So what we did was essentially 3 years ago, we changed from a product marketing orientation to a community marketing orientation, and really focus on that community aspect and getting into the clubs, getting into the schools, and building up a network, again, to reinvigorate the fan base and fill the funnel, essentially. A big part of this is filling that funnel of new audience that you can engage and connect with in a meaningful way. So We started our Wonder Kid program, which was free access to all matches that started this year. But before that, we were running a lot more school programs, a lot more club programs, working on club co-op programs. We started the Wanderers Foundation, which helps support a lot of these things in terms of the philanthropic funding to be able to get things done at pace. So we started the Future Wonder Woman program, which is a free program for young girls that were at a certain skill level that hadn't made it into the elite rep squads. But basically, if you're not in the elite rep squad, you kind of back down to 2 or 3 nights a week training, and the product pool, or the pool of players that you're in, is a little bit, less consistent. So we wanted to bring the best group of girls together, and that grew from 60 in the first year to 80 last year, and this year we're moving up to 100 participants in that. And we've seen players from that already get selected to go to colleges in the US, selected in A-League teams, and a number of players are in trial-on teams for the Wanderers now as well, which has been really exciting. So we're doing a number of these programs in the youth boys space, girls space, creating the pre-academy, creating different school opportunities, creating partnerships with school networks as well, which has been really important, and some really good government support of that as well, which has helped us, I guess, escalate that in terms of speed that we can do things. But also it's given us ability to focus on those that may not have the means to be able to access sport. So we've got a real focus with that on all abilities, on female, on multicultural, Indigenous, and really focus on the area we're in, which is, we're based in Rudy Hill, have been for 11 years. It's surrounded by a number of lower socioeconomic areas, and there's a lot of diversity in those areas in terms of wealth and the haves and have-nots. But in the school network, there's a lot of schools that are actually have a really low socioeconomic basis. So to be able to provide activity for them is really important in terms of, especially if there's new migrant families and families with large numbers of kids, or families going through whatever hardship they might be going through. Being able to give them something so that over time that generational change will mean hardship can be generational, but can also be grown out of very quickly in terms of effort and work and opportunities. So we're trying to create those opportunities and create that resilience view of, we'll give you some activities, we'll give you some opportunities, we'll give you some ability to experience things through football that really can create that long-term impact and create that generational growth to grow the venue back. It's a long-term play, not a short-term play, but I think AFL sort of saw that with their Auskick program, that you've got to be out there, you've got to be delivering, because they're not all going to funnel in, they're not all going to become serious fans, but the more you can reach out to in a meaningful way, you can create meaningful outcomes for them outside of just the football prism and the sports prism, but in the general society, that being good for Western Sydney is hugely important. And so that's been the sort of focus in terms of how we've changed our marketing focus over the last few years, and really trying to tie in on that, and then working with cool brands, whether that be Cater, who was a Western Sydney hip hop station. There used to be another station that basically got changed, rebranded, and became really focused on hip hop. And then with brands like G'd Up, so we've got a partnership with G'd Up, which is a massive Western Sydney streetwear success story, just to do little things with them. And then you get the big partners, like getting on board with Adidas through Ultra Football is huge. When we were 8 years with Nike, and they were a fantastic partner. I've got Shinji's jersey behind me still. That was our first ever Nike collaboration for that jersey, and they're iconic brands, and they really cut through in a football space. And I think having all those different factors molding together is really important to be able to just create that solid foundation to be able to grow from, and then making sure you fill that funnel with all these new audiences, and you tell that story to the public in that engagement process, which is, we're not just about a football team on the pitch. A lot of fans just want to know about that, but we also want to be able to engage people and bring them together. And I think that was a big impetus on making the Wanderers Vibes that we built and opened in end of 2022, was about being able to have a space for local people to come and play football in a safe and well-presented environment.
And so for that, I mean, the Wanderers 5 facility, like, it's not a matter of, finding a plot of land and saying we're going to build it. What were some of the steps, you've put in, long-term efforts into the community? That's, what you're selling both to the community themselves, but then also your corporate partners and also to government. What were some of the key steps to get that facility up and running?
So the start of all that was, I guess, the relationship we created with Blacktown City Council in the early days of the Wanderers, which was we had a home base at Blacktown. There was a lot of greenfield site across the road where Blacktown District Football Club was. They essentially had a synthetic field and 2 other fields. We ended up developing that plot of land through the ownership spend of, I think they spent around $30 million of their own capital to build this Wanderers football park, which is, was 9 pitches. Now it's 8 because we took one to build the 5s. But essentially, we've got 8 full-size pitches, multiple change rooms, gymnasium for our men's and women's elite programs and our academy programs, a cafe, a lot of space to be able to engage and run programs. Then the Wanderers 5s essentially came about because there's a facilities deficit in Western Sydney, Blacktown especially. There is a large number of people playing, a large population growing, one of the fastest growing cities in Western Sydney. And there was just a limited supply of all-weather pitches that you could use. So our focus was on creating a meaningful proposition to the government as part of a competitive process, the Greater Sydney Sports Facility Fund that was available over a few years period under the previous government. And it was essentially available funds that you had to co-contribute to be able to create a space. So we came up with this great plan of the five-a-side fields, so 9 five-a-side fields, a change rooms, reception, fully enclosed on the space of essentially 1 football field. So turning 1 football field, which could essentially take 20 to 30 players per hour, to a venue that now can take 90 to 120 players per hour to be able to play and participate in football in all weathers, at all times, unless there's lightning above. So we've been able to run that space now since 2022 with multiple programs and events and tournaments. Tonight, the Pacifica nations are coming to start a regular Monday night activity here, which is around encouraging Pacifica women to play sport and enjoy the sport. And there's food trucks plenty out there tonight. We've got an after-school program that we run with the Department of Education. It's all around those low socioeconomic schools in the area, bringing them in for after-school activities where otherwise they might not have an after-school opportunity for any engagement, which has been really, really, a great inclusion in terms of our community program. And then I've got my five-a-side team playing in about half an hour or 45 minutes, I should say, tonight over at the 5s as well. So old men like me get to kick a ball around still and have a bit of fun with their mates in a time-limited world and, sort of running limited space. It's only 20 by 30 metres, so it's much easier to get around and sort of run in small circles rather than, on a 110-metre pitch.
Yeah, that effectively, back to what you were talking about before, like a way for you to invite the community. Like it's not, hey, here's a bus ad, which you do or you might do, like that says come to a Wanderers game. It's like they're coming to the facility, they're learning about the Wanderers story. They're obviously surrounded by paraphernalia, but then, they become part of the family. They see the support in the community and it sort of, fills that fan funnel. It's these multifaceted invites you've got, whether it's a school program, the big brand work that you're doing. It's something you've got to do in that market, especially like you were saying, like the bit that stuck with me was especially these new fans, whether they be new immigrants or people, they need to be invited, and it might not be a Facebook ad that pops up and says come to a Wanderers game that's going to do that we can tick a box and say the conversion happened. It's a bit more multifaceted.
Yeah, and I think we have to be very diverse in terms of what we do and have a lot of touch points across the spectrum, because when we do these great brand pieces, and again, these aren't high-budget things, we're doing them with partners that we've worked together with for a long time to be able to create these opportunities. And they do an amazing job with us and really understand what our brand is and who we are and what we're trying to achieve. But that media buy behind that isn't huge, so you've got to really be careful with how much you spend on anything, because you can't then amplify it as much as you'd like to, as much as it deserves, really, because you're essentially relying on an earned and owned strategy for that, rather than any sort of above the line spend, other than the contra you might get from Channel 10, Paramount Plus, which is great. We really appreciate that. But the sort of social media online spend that you might put behind it to be able to just amplify that after the organic goes well. That's really the critical part of this. And if we just focused on one thing in the brand, we'll be seen for a minute and then lost. So we've got to be constantly on, constantly activating, constantly creating things. So whether that's a club ambassador program that one of our guys runs on a Saturday, Sunday for local clubs in their pre-season to bring through, which has just started this year, to the Specifica, to bringing schools in to be able to give them footballing opportunities where a lot of these schools don't have a lot of sporting space. So we've got a number of partnerships that are bringing these things together and creating opportunity, and it's cost effective, it's localized, so it's easy to get people here, and it's just about doing a lot of things all the time and getting little wins from each one to be able to aggregate to make the big win. I wish sometimes we could just do an amazing brand piece, pat ourselves on the back, and have a month of watching the ticket sales roll in, but it just doesn't work that way in football. So it's about doing all those small things and really scaffolding up to something big.
So we've discussed a lot of marketing and comms because that's how I know you and when I worked there for FA. But the last couple of years you've been GM of operations. What does that role entail? How is that? What are some of the new things? Things like the facility you've got your teeth into.
It feels like the role's problem catching. We've still got a large group internally that we manage, so we've got about 24 staff now. So there's management still of making sure we know what we're doing and the direction we're going, and trying to make sure the culture feels good for our teams across the community, membership ticketing, media marketing, and the fives now as well. There's a lot of integration in terms of the whole club working together to try and find avenues to, one, create revenue, but also to make sure all the engagements can happen in a organised way. So a lot of in the remit now is, IT is the venue operations and management. So that comes down to, making sure the electricians and the plumbers and the any of the operators that work outside of us and the groundsmen, which are hugely important for us. They're from Blacktown City Council, and we've got a great relationship with the Blacktown venue management guys. Big shout out to Lockie and Heath over there. But that relationship's been built to make sure that we can get the best out of our fields and manage them the best way we can to bring in huge numbers of people into the venue each weekend. We have the Independent Football Association. They play out of here on Sundays, and car parking is chaos. So this week is working about a car parking event management solution that we can bring in that's cost effective, but also eliminate some of those issues around potential liability of injury or inconvenience for families, coming into these events and, bringing 2,000 people into a sports park for a day. You need to be able to manage that really clearly outside of just the on-field events. Then there's the fives, there's the marketing, media, comms, which is still a really great team, but a small team. We work with about 4 agencies now externally, so one in events, one in our production warehouse, Chisel, our other production in events, Murmur, who's our digital agency, and Sports Cloud, who's our sort of CRM agency now, and they've really helped us grow and develop in our CRM space. So Trent Jacobs and his team down there, he used to be the CEO of Melbourne Victory. He started up that, and he's doing great things with his Dutch counterparts in terms of being able to maximise value in this MarTech stack that we're looking at. So we built our group by borrowing from where others have the expertise, and that's been really, really beneficial because we all sort of are on the same page. We all know what we're trying to do, and everyone's got their job, and everyone's trying to work together to achieve that, which is fantastic given the figures we're operating in aren't $1 million figures. We're working, as I said, on a shoestring to be able to make this stuff happen and really effectively come together across all the facets of it. So that partnership piece around those 4 different partners has really, really elevated what we can do and the expertise we can bring in to help us do what what we can't necessarily do internally as individuals.
Well, very mindful you've got to be playing 5 soon. So if you're anything like me, you need to warm up appropriately. So I want to get to the closing 5. Thank you very much for taking the time. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
I had to think back on this one. It was Brisbane Bullets. I think it was versus the Perth Wildcats. This was, I'm going to say, late 80s, early 90s, so I'm aging myself
like
out.
Leroy Loggins, Robert Sibley kind of era?
It was Derek Rucker, Leroy Loggins, Larry Sandstock. I remember going to a Brisbane Bullets training camp when I was about 8, and I sort of fell in love with this, amazing sport that, had some pretty cool places. And, back when Steve Carfino used to run the NBL, Channel 10, I think, used to have that on.
Channel 10 with Billy Woods.
Billy Woods. And,
remember those?
They were some fantastic days looking back at the glory days of the NBL. And, you can see the NBL returning to those glory days again because, the work Larry Kestel and his team's done in the last 5-10 years is incredible in terms of turning that sport back into a, really interesting and really viable sport again in this country. Always been viable in Europe and the US.
Completely. You would have been a lot of sports events. Do you have a favourite food memory or a go-to food at a sports event?
I do get to spend too much time in corporate hospitality, so it is a tricky one. If I'm at the baseball, it's a hot dog. If you're at a corporate hospitality event in the US, it's the lobster rolls. They are delicious. And in Australia, it's got to be the cheeseburger spring roll that they brought out. So Gemma Catering, who do our catering, have got this cheeseburger spring roll. It's pretty spot on. Yeah,
cheeseburger spring rolls are a delicacy now these days. What's the first app you open in the morning?
I'd like to say it's something really, really cool, but it's Instagram. It's the preference is get up and get some sunlight. The reality some mornings is get that dopamine hit in early. So Instagram's the one, and it's a quick couple of minutes of scrolling and then off to work.
Terrific. What is there someone that you either follow, have worked with, an author that the podcast listeners should be following, and why?
There's 2. I think Malcolm Gladwell's probably my favourite. I consume everything he puts out. So the Revisionist History podcast is fantastic. Evergreen and brilliant, and all these books, Tipping Point, Blink, Outliers, are all fantastic reads. And then Bill Simmons, I just love his coverage of the NBA. It's I've almost learnt more about the NBA from listening than watching.
And then when Bill Simmons has Malcolm Gladwell, you must be in a really happy spot.
Oh, absolutely, or vice versa. So, and then I guess the Smartless Boys for Pleasure is great. So when they interviewed Bill Simmons, happy days.
Yeah, very, very good. And lastly, you might have already spoiled one, but that's fine. What social media platforms are your MVP? And you can answer this personally, and you can also put your Wanderers hat on and say, what's the platform that's doing it for the Wanderers?
It's the double gold gong for Instagram. I pulled out of Facebook. I pulled out of X. I never learned how to use Snapchat. TikTok's for the kids. Instagram's still working for us from a club lens, and it's also delivering a lot of my up-to-date news, which is great, especially my little NBA, NBL, EPL, and Spanish football highlights, which is great. So it's always the algorithm works. It works for me, so it's my choice.
It does continue to work, and it is constantly nominated. Mark, lastly, if people are to say, hey, I've listened to this episode, we've got this far, want to reach out and say thank you for the episode, really interested in the Wanderers, what's the best place for people to do that?
LinkedIn's probably the best spot. Mark Jensen, at Mark Jensen. You can just search my name.
We'll put the links in the show notes. Knowing that I've known Mark for many, many years, and he did take 18 months to reply to my email. So, just put a date on it. Say, hey, Mark, in the next 6 months, can you reply to me? And if he doesn't, let me know, and I'll have no success.
I will follow up. Look, I did my MBA in the last 4 years while working full time. So that was the excuse I'm going to use for COVID and post-COVID. But I really should have got back to you sooner, saying not right now, but soon. real soon.
That's all right. Hopefully I'll be up in your part of the world soon and we can catch up for a beer because it's been too long.
That would be great. Squilla Chotty would look forward to that too, I'm sure. So it'll be good to catch up.
Cheers, mate.
Looking to help your digital or sponsorship team? Book in for a Pick My Brain session with Sean Callanan to help your team level up. Book now at sportsgeekhq.com/pickmybrain.
Thanks again to Mark Jensen. I did jest in the episode that I was chasing Mark down for many, many years to get him on the podcast. It was really good to get him on the podcast, especially now he has finished at Wanderers FC after a terrific stint of over a decade, helping the Wanderers build that brand, but also connect with that Western Sydney community. So you can connect with Mark on LinkedIn. All the links to connect with Mark, find out what he's doing next. I'll be watching with interest. You can go to sportsgeekhq.com/370 to connect with Mark. And Mark, all the best. And I look forward to catching up with you soon. Before I wrap up this episode, I just want to have a quick chat about Sport Next. Was here in Melbourne last week. It was a good couple of days, really busy week with both Sport Next in town and then followed up by the Grand Prix. It was good to reconnect with past guests, lots of Sports Geek podcast guests at the conference. But more importantly, one of the things I love going to conferences is to reconnect and also find and talk to some future podcast guests. So for those people who did chat to at Sport Next about coming on the podcast, my podcast producer Jess will be in touch. I really enjoyed doing my panel. Panels are always easy when you've got talented people. So Nadine, Peter, Spencer, thank you very much. If the audio and everything worked, that will be on the podcast feed shortly. Thanks to Matt and the MTKG crew for the invitation to the celebration of sport at the MCG. Always good to reconnect with the sport community of Australia, I guess, and just get together and celebrate what we do on a regular basis. And a big thanks to Hamish Anderson and Lee Mooney for inviting me to take part in Sport Next this year. It's got better year on year, 3 years now. I look forward to more discussions and more attendance by the doers. Execution is king in sport, in my opinion. And I think conference organisers overall need more panels of the people who are in the trenches. That one gets them to attend the conference, but then also helps them articulate what they're trying to do to higher up. So that's my challenge to every conference organiser, not just Sport Next. It's one that I'm always asking for. It's great having people talking theory, but I really do think there is value in walking through case studies, discussing the problems you have. Yes, it's great to celebrate the wins, but you also got to talk about how you got there, what were some of the hurdles, what were some of the bumps in the road, because that's where some of the biggest lessons are. Don't forget, if you did attend Sport Next, we have a Pick My Brain offer, 50% off, open until April 19. You've got to book it before April 19. That's a month after Sport Next. So give you a little bit of leeway. It's great to see a few bookings come through, and it's a great way for your team to solidify the lessons from Sport Next. So if you want, you can book it in and say, hey, what are the things we want to do? What are the action items out of what you've learned? So you can do that, and all you've got to do is send me an email, Sean@sportsgeekhq.com. Say that you attended, and we'll book in that 2-hour session. So looking forward to a few of those coming up. Until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Do you get Sports Geek news? Sean Callanan analyzes the latest sports business articles for you weekly. Sign up at sportsgeekhq.com. Want to help drive more revenue from your digital efforts? Book a time for a call. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call.